Yeah, we had 28 people on, so I think we're good to go if you are good to go.
Yeah, it's good enough for me.
Yeah, let's get started. Just so folks know, we were hoping to get to like know everyone a little bit if it was a more intimate setting, like fewer than 15 people, but just for the sake of time, we're probably just introduce ourselves as facilitators and then get into the program. But if people want to drop like their name, pronoun, like anything that you want us to know about you in the chat, we would love that, but no pressure. Yeah. Any other facilitators want to give a quick intro of themselves?
Did you do an intro of yourself, May?
You did not. May still fight toxic prisons. People don't even know your name right now, May.
We're all anonymous people named toxic prisons. My name is May. I am an organizer with Fight Toxic Prisons. I am in occupied Duwamish territories, and lately most of my work has been centered on supporting hunger strikers and kind of starting to move into doing hurricane support work now. And my background kind of came from doing anti-colonial climate justice direct action and then realizing that incarcerated folks are just completely left out of the conversation. So I kind of pivoted towards focusing most on abolition work. Check. Ducky, who are you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ducky. I use they, them, and she, her pronouns. I am currently residing on occupied Tacuba Tere and Takelma territory in what is commonly called Southern Oregon. My organizing background, I'm a member of the Campaign to Fight Toxic Prisons. I also work with a local abolition collective called the Siskiyou Abolition Project. And I'm also Earth Firster, and I align myself with biocentric movements for environmental liberation, as well as Indigenous solidarity. Check.
Pick a person.
Robin, go for it.
Sup? I'm Robin, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm on occupied Shawnee territory, and I got started organizing through racial justice education work to kind of bring white folks into multiracial spaces and the least harmful ways possible so that people could collaborate. And have since gotten started doing a lot of security work. I do anti-fascism photography, as well as abolition organizing in the Midwest and the South. Richie.
Hey everybody, I'm Richard. I use he, him pronouns. I'm an organizer with Fight Toxic Prisons. I live in the so-called Texas on the land of the Comanche. I organize with lots of different groups. I love making connections with folks. Happy to have everybody here.
I can go next. Hey y'all, I'm Lil. I don't honestly really care what pronouns you refer to me with. I live.
Oh, did we lose them?
No, Lil.
No.
Lil!
No.
Lil's internet is not always the most reliable.
Facts.
Well, we'll wait for Lil to get back. I am Jordan. I use they, them pronouns. I am one of the co-founders of Fight Toxic Prisons, FTP, and been organizing with this crew for about 5 years now. And I also shout out to the folks with CAPE in London. I lived over there for a bit and was organizing with them. And I'm also the National Prison Closing Coordinator for the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. And we are going to end the incarceration of women and girls in our lifetime. Did we get Lil back?
I don't see Lil back. They're a super rad organizer from Appalachia, done a lot of work around fights and prison fights on coal land, and do a lot of harm reduction work as well, and just general badass.
Yeah. Seconded.
Yeah, so I guess we can get started now. I just want to acknowledge that everyone pretty much who went around and in the chat even like mentioned who's like what indigenous land they're calling from, and I just want to reflect back that that's really important and us to really take a moment to center ourselves in that land that we're present from, not just as a formality but as an active recognition that this is indigenous land, this is occupied territory, and the struggle for abolition is completely inseparable from the struggle for the abolition of settler colonialism. And this is because the legacy of colonization and incarceration are one and the same, and they're both based in the same logics of extraction and disposal. We know that incarceration has always been a tool of colonization, and Indigenous folks continue to be most disproportionately criminalized just for existing. And so, yeah, we basically want to start anything that we're doing from that perspective because we think that abolishing prisons means abolishing the settler colonial state. And so there's not really any point to anything that we're doing if we're not grounding ourselves in that. So yeah, I just want to be really explicit about that. And then also, I think a lot of people are kind of like, oh, climate justice and abolition, like these are two separate things that we're bridging together, or environmental justice and prisons, like these are two separate ideas that we're trying to connect. But I want to offer the framing that we don't really subscribe to ideas that environment or wilderness or any of the things that are outside of us that need to be protected. We kind of understand our environments as wherever we are, wherever we live, and for us and for our incarcerated loved ones, like those are sites of environmental justice struggle. And in addition, like we have comrades inside who are doing environmental justice work on the inside, and it's just not recognized as such. So when we talk about climate justice and abolition, it's really the same struggle, and it's about amplifying the work that's already being done and reframing it so that we can better understand it as what it is. I'm not sure, Richard, do you know if Bryant is going to call in or if we have a recording from him that we wanted to play up top?
We have a recording. Jordan, do you have the recording on our outline? He might be able to call in later. I haven't heard from him today yet, though. But I gave him the time zones that we would be in. I sent him a message a little while ago.
Did you have a specific recording, Richard? I don't have one on the timeline.
Okay. Well, let's come back. Let's find the recording. Let's come back to that part, and then we can just play. Do you have part of the Yale one on the Google Drive?
I'm not sure. Can you go look for that, Richard? And we'll just keep going.
Oh, yeah. We can keep going, and I'll look for the recording. That's not a problem.
Cool, thank you. So yeah, I guess just moving forward, we were wondering what one thing that folks are hoping to get out of this workshop is. And if you want to unmute yourself and say it, feel free. If you want to drop it in the chat, we can keep track of that too. So yeah, just wondering, like, why did folks come to this? What are you hoping to get out of it?
I can jump in. My name's Akila. I use she, her pronouns, and I feel like I've crossed paths with various folks from Fight Toxic Prisons a number of times over the last couple of years. I'm just excited to learn more about the organizing that y'all are doing, and I feel like I'm pretty new to a lot of the more in-depth abolition ways of thinking, and so excited to learn more about that from y'all.
Cool. Thank you, Akila. I'm going to read a few that came through the chat. Kai is just here to support. We love you, Kai. Vanessa is looking to learn more about this link and how to get involved in organizing. People are interested in how all of this is connected. The active struggles FTP is involved in, especially given COVID, and we will definitely talk about that. Katie is interested in better learning these links and also practical tools to be able to apply in everyday abolition work. Yeah, Chelsea says support, connection, perspective, tools. Yeah, we're so excited about all of this. That's definitely things that we're going to cover. Anyone else want to share? If not, we can go ahead and move on to the schedule overview. Cool. So moving forward, we're just going to spend a little bit of time talking about definitions, like making sure we understand common terms of like, what are we talking about when it comes to abolition, transformative justice, and what is climate justice. Then talk about how prisons are toxic and have a discussion about the intersections and like how some of our work ties into that. And then Ducky is going to facilitate a discussion on how we can better plan for what we can do locally and regionally, and how we can like use tools that we already have to like win these fights. And then we'll just wrap up with some questions. So
like Lil also just rejoined us, so maybe if they want to introduce themselves as a part of the collective.
Will, you there?
Hi, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got rural internet problems. What's up? I don't know how much y'all heard before. It seemed like it cut off right when I was talking, but I'm Lil. I use they, them, or any pronoun really. I reside on occupied Monoton land in so-called southern West Virginia. I work in harm reduction and am part of various abolition, prison support organizing, anti-racist organizing, and just a lot of movement building in Central Appalachia. So it's good to be here. Sorry, my internet sucks, and that might happen again.
Glad you're back.
Richard, you want to tell us about some definitions?
Sure. I think the first part we wanted to kind of facilitate a discussion about like what is abolition, and honestly, like I think the best way to kind of facilitate that discussion is just to kind of like get a sense from y'all what comes to mind when y'all hear a term like abolition, and then we can talk a little bit about like how that relates to an abolitionist vision for sure. So yeah, in no particular order, feel free to share your thoughts on it, or also comment in the chat and we can read out loud whatever comments you say about that in the chat as well. Okay, we do have some comments. Does somebody want to read some of the comments that we have so far, or do y'all want me to go through some of these?
I can do that.
Okay.
So we've got a lot of different good ideas in here. One person has said that abolition is transformative justice. Another person has said abolition makes me think of dismantling unjust hierarchical structures. One person has said a complete transformation of our world so that prisons become unnecessary. And I really like that.
I like that too. That's a really good one.
Someone has said, I think of abolition as not just a destruction of the institutions and systems that oppress us, but a together to build alternatives such that we do not need those systems. Hot damn, why are we leading this workshop?
Yeah, y'all got some great ideas out here.
Someone has said a culture of love and healing where no human is indisposable. Y'all,
damn, that's fire right there. I like that. Who said that one?
Woo. Someone said abolition is the abolishment of the system. We've got burning it down to build anew, haha. Which
I like that. Hey, we all got the fires on. I don't think I can really see my shirt, but it says "Fire to the Prisons." Shout out to our homies who made this.
We've got eradicating systems of oppression. Abolition means preventative care and community-led care, which is, y'all are just like...
Dang, yeah.
And discipline structures that don't support healing, growth, and connection. And just in abolition is grounded in the history of abolishing slavery.
Akila, heck yeah. Heck yeah. I like that. Yeah, like we had a discussion like as a group yesterday just about like what abolition meant to us. And it's really good to hear that a lot of the things that we're talking about is reflected just in the comments that we have up here. Like for me, I always think about abolition as intricately connected to dismantling white supremacist structures, but that's only one part of it. I said white supremacy in all its iterations, which includes a lot of stuff, but it also involves building up. It involves its connection with colonialism. It involves its connection with slavery. There's a lot of different aspects to it. Something that I'll point out just from some of the comments is I was really happy just to see some of the comments just about like, it's not just about tearing down and it's not just burning up systems. A lot of that stuff is fun. It's really about creating a better world. It's about transformative justice. It's about like creating safe communities for everyone. And that's what it like, yeah, that's kind of what it means to me. But definitely if other folks want to say a little bit more too, by all means.
I think the one thing that I will say, and this is something that I've been really using to ground myself in abolition work and in my passions lately, is the idea that abolition is care work, and abolition is inherently about centering ourselves within the communities that we're working in, and that work really needs to be pushed forward and guided by the idea that, as someone said in the comments, that no human being is indisposable and that it's a responsibility of being social beings to care for the people that we are in community with.
Mm-hmm. And like something else that like I like to think about when I think about abolition too, is it's abolition is also it's a call to creativity and it's a call to our imaginations to collectively rethink the way we see our relationships with the world that we live in. So that includes nature, that includes the environment, that includes each other, that includes the way we see ourselves. Like there's so many dimensions to it and so many structures of oppression and lots of other things have shaped the way that we see all those things. So that's why I think like for me, creativity and the imagination, the call abolitionist imagination, or however you want to talk about that, those are really important things.
Yeah, abolition.
Other thing,
means...
sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, team.
No, you go first.
Okay. For me, it's a daily practice, and that's something that I really like about it because I'm not someone who's drawn to theory or to academic subjects. You know, I'm not someone that reads long texts or things like that. I like very practical things. And abolition is something that I can do in small pieces in my day-to-day life by deciding, you know, that I don't need to call the cops for everything that I've been told that I ought to. By deciding that I can get to know my neighbors and see if maybe they need something, if they need help before code enforcement gets called on them because their yard's overgrown. Maybe they've been injured, maybe they have a lot going on mentally and they really just need someone to check in on them. So I like that there are small ways that I can take steps toward abolition on a regular basis. A lot of times when I talk to people about abolition, it seems so broad and far away that they can't imagine it. And so they feel overwhelmed and don't want to try for it, even if it sounds nice to them. And I don't think it that way.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar, just that abolition is a verb. It's something you have to work on all the time. I think for me, that includes like working on all of the problems that come up that are just human problems that keep you from being able to relate to your neighbors and community. Like if you're a conflict avoidant person, working on being able to work through conflict. If you're a person who's a little louder and it's easier for you to say how you feel, maybe that means working on being more of an active listener. So yeah, I think that's just a way that I try to practice abolition every day.
I want to call attention to two things that were dropped in the comments. One is someone said, I might have missed it, but patriarchy was not mentioned, and I wonder if a feminist ethic might be a part of the solution.
Absolutely.
To which 100%. I think abolition is also rooted in the concept that we are all struggling for liberation from all of these different forms of oppression. Patriarchy absolutely fits into that puzzle as well. And don't think it's possible to have an abolitionist ethic without an analysis of the patriarchy as a part of that as well.
Correct.
The other thing is that someone said theory is difficult for me too, but abolition feels like a practice of love.
Hell yeah. I love all of this. I feel like we could, Hannah asked what was the last part. I think the last part that Ducky just repeated back was what Kai said about this being love as well. And that patriarchy, like dismantling patriarchy needs to be at the root of dismantling the prison system and the carceral ideologies. So yeah, we could talk about this probably for the whole hour and a half.
Facts.
But I just want to acknowledge that there's a lot more that we want to get to, and the next section is kind of like, what is climate justice? So we're just going to do a similar brainstorm where y'all can just like rapid fire, like what comes to mind. Justice. Do one of the other facilitators want to read things off so I can write?
Sure. All right, so what was the last part that we're on?
Folks have been throwing out what they mean or what they think climate justice means.
True. Black feminist scholars. Is that what you put in May? Angela Davis, Miriam Kava.
No, I was just dropping 19th names that need to be named from the last section.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's a good point, Jordy.
Yeah, I wrote it down, and I will take a picture of this and post it on our social media later. So don't worry about the notes going away.
Okay. Climate justice means racial justice. True.
I
It
said
means
liberation
undoing
of the land and the people.
Yeah.
Land back, double land back.
Yep.
Healthy relationships between all beings.
Can
Yep.
folks who said land back elaborate on what that means? Like, what does land back, what do these two words together mean to you?
Yeah, that's a good point.
While they're typing that, someone said going back to ancestral practices in liberation. Also, people and land, excuse me, over profit, taking responsibility for future and past generations.
What else y'all got? What's some other thoughts on?
Is it
What
okay
can
if
we,
I
yeah.
speak?
Hey,
No, Kai, you can't speak. Sorry. I'm gonna censor you.
Yeah, I feel like I have a lot of thoughts, I guess, coming up, and I'm thinking about like right now in our current system, like what creates a lot of harm to the land and to the people is like property, this idea of like property. And so like undoing that, but also, in that I guess I haven't read a whole lot about like land back, but I feel like it's this idea of, like land back to all the indigenous folks who have like been stewards of this land, and not only like indigenous folks like who have like tribal ties, but also like Black indigenous folks as well, because we like Black ancestors of this land, like we're also stewards like of this land. So yeah.
True. And Katie said, I see land back as indigenous people having control over their lands and waters and being able to protect them, and also can cultivate a larger culture of reciprocal relationship between us all.
I think one thing I want to bring to this conversation is that for me, climate justice also implies an international lens. When we're talking about climate, we're talking about the global effects of climate change, and we're talking about all of the reciprocating effects that go in with that, which includes the refugee crises that we're seeing everywhere and really stems back to the roots of colonialism. And I think a lot of what folks are talking about absolutely ties in with that, but I want to bring the internationalist perspective to this.
True. And I think Ethne started it with land back means free Palestine. And that's like, I think that's another part of climate justice too. Climate justice is explicitly linked with practices of colonialism. Those things are separate, but they're also extremely related to each other as well. Anybody else has thoughts? Feel free to put it in the chat, or you can speak it out too, whatever folks feel comfortable with.
Keelis said climate justice equals toppling the extraction mentality, imperial extraction of culture, wealth, resources, people, extraction of labor, life, extractive industry, etc. Agnes said climate justice means reparations.
Dang, okay, hey.
I think
go ahead, Ducky. You good.
I was going to say, just out of the interest of time, it seems like we're already beginning to have a conversation around the intersections of climate justice and broader struggles.
Facts.
So maybe this would be a natural segue into specifically talking around the intersections of climate justice and abolition, right?
Let's do it.
So does anyone have any ideas of their own around how climate justice and abolition intersect that you want to drop in the chat? True. Katie said disposability of people and the extraction mentality, like Akila said. Kai said prisons are toxic to the environment and the people. Do you want to elaborate on that a bit, Kai?
I feel like I'm having a hard time getting my words together, but like, you know, like there's just so many fucked up things that happen, I guess, or that, I don't know. I'll try to get my words together and come back.
I agree, though. There's so many fucked up things that happen. Akila said prisoners being used to fight forest fires caused by climate change and fossil fuels.
Yep. Good one.
Bowden said people inside are often on the front lines of pollution and severe water
exploiting the natural world. Would lead to
prisons are seen by the elites as a solution to people displaced by climate collapse. True, and this is a big part of what Ducky was saying in terms of the international connections of climate change. As we begin to see a rise in climate displacement and climate refugees, mixed in with an international, blah, 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 blah. My brain died. Like an international neoliberal economic world order essentially being like run through the WTO, right? Run through American, European control of banks that are putting neoliberal economic policies onto third world countries, right? That's one, rapidly expanding climate change, global warming, and two, also destroying completely people's indigenous ways of lives. And thus contributing to both economic and climate refugees. And so what we're seeing as a response in Europe and in the US is a much more increasingly militarized and carceral border regime, right? Internment camps, etc. And along with that, very deadly response to indigenous land protectors across the globe. The Guardian's got a very good database that tracks the hundreds and hundreds of killings of indigenous environmental activists and other environmental activists. It's good to watch out for. Oh my God, I can't. How does one to begin to address this multi-headed hydra? What are some successful ways that activists have made inroads in addressing some of the issues mentioned so far? Richard or Ducky, do you want to give a rundown on Bryant?
Sorry.
Arroyo is a prisoner in central Pennsylvania. Richard, is Bryant at Frackville?
Yeah.
So Bryant Arroyo is a prisoner who has been a comrade of ours with Fight Toxic Prisons since the very beginning. And he, in the mid-2000s, I believe, found out that there was a cement plant that was slated to be built in close proximity to SCI Frackville in Pennsylvania, where he was.
Literally next door.
Yeah.
And through organizing with folks on the inside, as well as through connections and comrades on the outside, Bryant actually, while still being imprisoned, was able to bring enough attention and enough pressure to that cement plant that he halted construction on that plant. And a lot of the framing around that fight was around it being environmental justice and around prisoners not having say into what was being planned for quite literally their backyard.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And you gotta
Richard,
remember,
do you want to add that?
I mean, yeah. Well, go
Mhm.
ahead, Jordan.
Oh, you can go, Richie.
Nah, I wasn't really gonna add much to what you're saying, Ducky, but that's pretty much it. Basically, me and Robin, we talked about this a little bit in our talk that we did last Sunday about what it means to be a political activist and to be incarcerated, and how the intersection of like the state goes hand in hand with all the other harms that happens to folks. And like looking at the lives of folks like Bryant Arroyo and many others, we kind of see like from those people who are most vulnerable, the explicit impact that like all of our policies have on people. And what we had folks read last week for our talk is an article by David Pello. They kind of highlighted some of those interconnections between the environmental movement and abolition movements. So a new way of framing conversations about environmental liberation and earth justice is to start with folks, including incarcerated folks, who are most vulnerable to those conditions, and looking at the work that they're doing in their communities. And Bryant Arroyo is a really good example of how that happens.
Mm-hmm. And just to make it,
as far as patterns go, I think it's worth pointing out that the state tends to put prisons in places where they're not going to be widely noticed, in rural places, in areas that don't have a lot of traffic, a lot of mainstream attention placed on them. And similarly, extractive industry tends to put extractive processes in those kinds of places as well. So you don't see extractive industry necessarily happening in the places where wealth is accumulated and hoarded. And when those two realms collide, what we end up finding is that areas of environmental extraction are often placed in very close proximity to prisons or to pending prisons, or in some cases, like in Letcher County, Kentucky, they will try and put a new prison on a former mining site as a way to kind of hide these atrocities of mainstream society in as brutally efficient of a way as possible. And so that is one of the more visceral and more literal intersections of environmental and abolitionist work, is where these two areas are colliding.
Maybe Lil or Robin could speak a little bit to what happened in Letcher County and like how that went down, what strategies were used, just for folks who don't know.
I can do that. Sure. So, for folks who don't know, Letcher County, Kentucky is where I'm from. I live in West Virginia these days, but yeah, in 2015 or so, it was announced that they would be building a federal prison in the very small rural community in southeastern Kentucky that I am from. And so it really kind of lit a fire under my ass and a lot of people in the community's ass to be like, oh, wow, you know, we need to be doing abolitionist work. Simultaneously, there were folks nationally, some of them who are also facilitating this workshop, who wanted to be a part of stopping that prison, and also folks who were on the inside in different various prisons, some who'd been incarcerated in Appalachia and have seen firsthand kind of the effects of shifting a coal economy to a prison economy, and sort of just like what prison. I'm gonna take the mask off so I can talk to y'all. But just seeing sort of like the conditions in a lot of prisons in rural Appalachia, which are often really bad. So from early on, there was a really interesting mix of folks from all different backgrounds who wanted to stop this prison. And there was also sort of, so basically what happened is the money was allocated for the prison project to the Bureau of Prisons. And from that time, there was like a few years, just a couple years to sort of organize around it before construction started. Even though there was a lot of organizing to keep the record of decision from happening, which is basically the seal of approval that says, yeah, we're building this prison legally. That was still passed. That was in 2018, 2017, maybe at the end of 2017, 2018. Anyway, continuously more people were fighting this. There was a lawsuit on behalf of some incarcerated folks. Yeah, two lawsuits. One on behalf of incarcerated people, like who were the plaintiffs in this case, saying like, we don't, this prison isn't going to be a humane place for us to be transferred to, or for anyone to be in, and so we're fighting it. And then also from community members and sort of like national allies to stop the prison as well. So basically nobody wanted this prison, and because of sort of the coalition of people trying to stop it, they reversed the record of decision, and the money's still kind of in limbo. It's possible that it could be given to us and to, what's happening at the border, which is not what we want. And there's still work to be done around that. But as far as like, in my experience, and I think most folks who were part of this campaign could agree, like, it wouldn't have been stopped if it wasn't for sort of the coalition between all kinds of different people who lived in the community, people who were incarcerated nearby, or just had an idea of what it might be like to be incarcerated there, people who are serving lifelong sentences in prison who, saw the campaign and felt connected to that. And like environmentalists and even lawyers, a little bit of everybody. So that's what happened with the USP Lecture Project, and I'd be happy to like answer questions about it later on if I can put my email in the chat or something.
Also, real quick, going off what Lil was saying, I also want to like lay out that we use some like explicit environmental strategies and tactics in fighting USP Lecture. So the second lawsuit that we filed, we essentially created our own community-led organization called the Friends of the Lily Cornett Woods and North Fork River Watershed, because USP Lecture, they were planning to build it on a mountaintop removal site, but also that mountaintop removal site was 1.5 miles away from one of the last 3 old growth forests in Kentucky. And so, prison's 24-hour floodlighting, et cetera, it's going to completely destroy the delicate flora-fauna balance within that old growth forest, right? And so we were able to We pursued a lot of different strategies. At one point, we were like, oh, there are potentially some endangered bats on the land. So we tried to find the endangered bats and stop it that way. We worked with the people to get like inside information that managed the Lily Courtnett Woods, because it was managed through a public university. And, they couldn't publicly be on our side, but privately they could give us a lot of tips and stuff like that. Challenging the environmental impact statement is, as far as I know, it's only been done once before in regards to a prison, and that tactic was pioneered by Critical Resistance and the Mothers of East Los Angeles in the late 90s or something, early 2000s maybe. And they were able to successfully stop the construction of a new county jail using that, or now as a state prison. Unfortunately, 5 years after all the resistance died down, because they won, the state came back in and built the prison eventually. But I just want to highlight that there are multiple tactics that have been used in the environmental movement for a long time that can be explicitly applied to campaigns against prisons.
I think that's one of the things that really excites me about this intersection of work, as someone whose background is in the environmental direct action movement, before transitioning towards doing more abolition work, is really the areas where our skill sets as environmental organizers can apply to this seemingly new but not really new framework, if we understand prisons as an additional arm of extractive industry, which they most certainly are. I think that really opens up the possibilities of what we as environmental organizers, with a whole range of skills linked to environmental defense, can do to stop prisons from being built, as well as supporting prisoners currently and working to tear down pre-existing prisons. If it's okay, I kind of want to use this opportunity to open it up to the group to kind of have y'all brainstorm what some of those skill sets are and how you think that they might be applicable in these situations. So if folks have ideas, I would love to see y'all drop them in the comments, or if you feel comfortable turning your mics on and just sharing them. Yeah. Yeah, totally. So someone just said, can you clarify the question? And the question is, how do our skill sets as environmental organizers apply to abolitionist frameworks? So what are the skills that we already have from doing environmental work, and how can we transition those skills towards fighting prisons or fighting the prison complex?
Stevie said, ensuring sustainability of our methods. That's so important. Can you or someone elaborate on what that means?
I don't yet know what my work situation will be this fall, because the virus will affect enrollment at the college I teach at.
Can folks make sure that they're on mute if you're not talking?
It's also kind of a general tactic, but it's something that helped in the USP Letcher case. In the environmental impact statement, I think the first one that they put out, they did not mention the coal slurry pond that was on the property. That would have greatly impacted the water quality for anyone in the prison, because the people incarcerated there would have been drinking just the tap water that was available, while bottled water is usually shipped in for the folks that work in the prisons. which would have been a lot cleaner. And so folks were able to use photography and other like mapping technology to gather proof of the coal slurry pond's existence and force them to have to address it.
I just used Google Maps. It was right there.
It was?
Yeah, it was just on Google Maps.
Oh, I thought someone had to go get a picture of it too.
No. I wanted to.
Okay.
Yeah, it was literally on Google Maps. I just screenshotted it.
Well, then they are worse than we thought.
Kitty elaborated a bit, saying sustainable in the ecological sense and not acting against our own ideals, but also in terms of longevity of movement, avoiding burnout, etc. True.
Someone also said using correct data to target infrastructure development. And yes, absolutely. Also to just call attention to infrastructure and to what's going on. That's something that Fight Toxic Prisons has engaged in since the very beginning. And one of our, it actually didn't get to this point with the Letcher campaign, but within FTP, there were talks about eventually doing blockades if it got to that point in construction. And this photo is also being shown from an action that Fight Toxic Prisons helped to coordinate that was at the national headquarters of Core Civic, which is the largest private prison operator in the country. And that action was a multi-tiered blockade that shut down Core Civic's headquarters for the day, alongside all of the blockades at ICE facilities that were happening throughout the summer of, I think that was 2018.
Agnes said centering BIPOC and making decisions/actions. True. And in regards to that point, Agnes, I've been thinking a lot over the last couple of months in regards to like the idea of accountability, not as in the sense that, oh, somebody did something wrong or somebody caused harm, so we need to figure out an accountability process for them, but broadening up the idea of accountability into beginning to think through multi-tiered layers of what does it look like for us to be accountable to something, right? And so the framework I've been thinking about is sort of like four-pronged. What does it look like for our movement work to be accountable to those most directly impacted? For FTP, that's people currently inside prisons, jails, detention centers, etc. Specifically, Black, Indigenous, and other POC folks that are drastically much more likely to be the targets of, neoliberal late-stage capitalist disposability, right? So accountability to those most directly impacted, accountability to our ancestors, which I think is something that is often overlooked, especially in white organizing spaces. I think whole other side rant, whiteness destroys any sense of ancestors, right? Accountability to those most directly impacted, accountability to our ancestors, accountability to our team, the people we're organizing directly with, and accountability to the broader movement, right? And I think that using sort of those layers of accountability to situate ourselves, it makes our organizing much more sustainable in the long run, tying back into what somebody was saying. I apologize, I can't remember your name. Wait, Kai, what? When did this happen? Kai said, not sure of the skill sets right now, but where I am, fellow organizers were able to close an Air Force base using the terms of environmental racism and environmental justice. I feel that the skill sets used must be the same. Nice.
I think one other thing that I want to bring into this, and I don't know if, well, first I want to also acknowledge that Kai also dropped in the comments in regards to what you were saying about accountability, Jordan, is accountability to the land itself.
True.
And I want to uplift that. I also kind of want to shift the conversation. I don't know if it got brought up, but the work that FTP has been doing around disaster response is also one of the tangible ways that we're working around the intersection of prisons and climate change. And also, as folks with environmental analysis, I think we're typically drawn towards doing disaster response because we recognize the role that climate disasters play within all of the wider movement. And within Fight Toxic Prisons, one of the things that we're doing is kind of applying the community-based response to mutual aid and disaster relief to focusing on the prisons, which are often being left out of those conversations. I know there are other folks on this facilitation team who have done a little bit more with disaster response, if one of y'all want to touch on that a bit.
It's very simple. We just don't want our loved ones who are incarcerated in the paths of hurricanes and wildfires to not be able to evacuate. So the past 3 years, I think? Oh, what?
I think it might have just been feedback, maybe.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so the past 3 years, we've mostly done the main strategy that we used is just phone zapping, just like having massive call-in campaigns and media campaigns to try to get incarcerated people to be evacuated when they are in evacuation zones. And so this mostly means like tracking where the hurricanes are, where the evacuation zones are, keeping track of our inside contacts and loved ones, and keeping track of who the targets are who can make those decisions. And it's still very much a learning process, but we have had some victories, and I think it's starting to come into general awareness more. And this year is supposed to be a pretty bad hurricane season, and so we're trying to assemble a crew to be working on that. So if you are interested in like getting into the nitty gritty or just amplifying what we're doing during hurricane season, which is right now, yeah, just let us know. Shoot us an email or drop in the chat that you're interested and we can connect.
Facts, yeah. Put your email in and we'll do the thing. We'll hook you up.
Anthony also dropped in the chat about how incarcerated people are sometimes forced to enlist as firefighters, but are not able to do that once they leave the carceral system. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's like definitely also something that we understand as a disaster in and of itself. However, like us as Fight Toxic Prisons don't do a lot of work specifically on that issue. I would say just because we haven't been asked to. It's kind of complicated. I don't want to get too much into it. But yeah, it's definitely an important issue that we want more people talking about, especially when it comes to climate justice and abolition.
I think when it comes to like hurricanes or any disaster that specifically affects a prison, folks got to remember that the event itself is usually not nearly as dangerous as the days following the event, right? Because our people are deemed disposable, our community is deemed disposable, right? And so where we see lack of disaster relief resources in Black and Brown communities on the outside, there is almost no resources whatsoever within the prisons. And so this is what's got us started around hurricane organizing. 3 or 4 years ago, when I think it was Harvey hit Houston and FCI Beaumont outside of Houston, 2 prisoners ended up dying at FCI Beaumont, not from the hurricane itself, but from them not having any water whatsoever to drink after the hurricane hit, as well as no food. So they were forced to drink, and this happens very commonly in disaster situations in prisons. If there's no water, the only water that's left is the toilet water. And so folks were forced to drink the toilet water after having stood in chest-high water for half a day when the floodwaters came into the prison. And that resulted in the death of 2 folks and widespread sickness. And so one of the things that I was happy about last year during hurricane season that unfortunately we didn't get to implement is we were working with mutual aid disaster relief, who did have like a truck full of water on standby to be delivered to a prison. But the problem that we faced, a lot of bottlenecks, the problem we faced is we couldn't in real time, because the hurricane knocked out all sorts of cell towers and phone lines and shit like that. We couldn't figure out which prison would need it, and we didn't know where to deliver it. So it's very high paced, very fast, very stressful work, but good team.
Yeah, I would also want to add that we're not only talking about prisons here, that we need to be expanding to thinking about juvies, detention centers, women's facilities, and something that a lot of people, abolitionists included, like leave out, which is mental health facilities. And I just want to like remind folks that in, I want to say 2018, there were 2 women named Nicolette Green and Wendy Newton who were basically left to drown as they were being transported from a mental health institution, and the police who were driving them left them handcuffed in the van and fled. And so I don't see this to be gruesome or anything, but just to remind folks that folks on the front lines of incarceration aren't necessarily people who like are in the criminal system, but also the mental health institutions. So yeah, there's like a huge breadth of work that needs to be done. We would love to have y'all on our team. I'm writing down y'all's email addresses. Thank you.
I think what May just said also kind of highlights, when at the very beginning of this workshop, when I mentioned that abolition means care work, that also means that, as May said, abolition necessitates the complete destruction and restructuring of how we look at mental health services as a society and as communities, and how we look at the disposability of people who are dealing with various neurodivergences. I kind of want to ask Richard, did you talk at all about the work that folks in Texas have been doing around air conditioning and heat?
Sure. Sure, I can talk about it. I can talk about a little of the stuff that we've been doing. In terms of like environment, yeah, I'll break it down real simple. In Texas, which is always hot as hell, there are 106 prisons here. Only 30 of them have air conditioning. And one of the issues I've been with Texas Prison Air Conditioning Advocates and several other groups, we're trying to get legislation passed that makes it mandatory for all facilities to have air conditioning. But also, it's not just about the air conditioning itself, it's about the types of air conditioning that they have too. Because oftentimes, like, the facilities that do have air conditioning, it's not central air, so it's like a tiny air conditioning thing or whatever. So that makes that also makes many of the medical issues and other issues that are happening in these facilities even worse. Specifically, the heating issue. Sorry, I dropped out a while ago. Had we gotten to talking about like how all this how the environmental stuff plays in with COVID?
We have not.
Okay. I'll just say briefly, that's kind of like one of the major issues in terms of the heating is the fact that many folks have like medications that they're dependent on, but it's also really heat sensitive stuff. So that's like how some of the issues with air conditioning are then compounded with medical issues, which is then compounded with the COVID crisis that folks are facing in facilities everywhere. Yeah, that's the brief version of the stuff that's happening with air conditioning. There's all sorts of other issues like water, that's a major issue.
As a result, according to one study republished by Forbes, I think it was, if you're inside prison, jail, juvie, etc., you're 550% more likely to get COVID, and you're 300% more likely to die from COVID. And like, to be clear, the massive spikes we're seeing in a few prisons in each state right now, for example, Richard and me and some local organizers organized a protest out of FMC Carswell here in Fort Worth, where they have now 650 cases of COVID. These spikes are going to happen everywhere. This is just the tip of a massive iceberg that's coming, because there's no way to keep COVID out of the prisons, and the prisons themselves are the most efficient breeding ground for the virus. A number of the top 10 COVID hotspots in the country, can't remember how many, but it was like 3 or 4 of them are prisons right now. And we're going to see massive spikes in every prison everywhere very soon over the next few months.
Yeah, COVID is the main natural disaster we've been fighting around Kentucky right now. And back in, I think, April, there was a massive infection at the Green River Correctional Complex. And they ended up with, I think the highest total of cases was about 370. And 3 people there actually died from it. And it wasn't until the infection rates were in the 300s that the governor actually did anything about it. And all they were able to really do was to separate everyone into separate populations based on their risk and their exposure. And after doing that, and after the infections seemed to subside, the entire state government pretty much treated it like it was a one-time thing. And those of us who had been organizing it around that to get everyone tested, sorry about the cat, or you're welcome for the cat, whichever it is. We organized to get everyone in the facility tested so that they could then isolate folks who were positive and then stop the spread before it killed anyone else. We were trying to organize to get them to do that in every facility, but they said they didn't have the resources and that it wasn't necessary. There are now outbreaks in 5 other facilities in the state of Kentucky, and there have been a total of 10 deaths, and they're still treating it as if it's kind of a one-time problem that won't keep recurring. And even more than that, when they talk about it publicly, they talk about it as if it's somehow the prisoner's fault, even though they aren't the ones going in and out between different populations. It's the guards. The guards are the ones going outside and going to the grocery stores and going about their daily lives and then bringing this infection in. Anyway, it's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, and I would add that it's not just Kentucky. Like, I've been doing work in California and Washington. Like, our FTP crew is literally in every region in the country, and we're all fighting this. And it's bad everywhere. And I would add, like, I think it was Ducky who mentioned, like, the biggest natural disaster that we're working with right now is COVID. And, like, I completely agree with that, but I just want to be really clear that when we're talking about natural disasters, that there's nothing natural about any of this and that it's completely preventable. And yeah, so just want to, like, underscore that I think the folks who are in power, the elites right now, like, want us to think that all of this is natural, like, oh, it's inevitable, it's just going to happen. But we literally have been organizing our asses off since March trying to prevent all of this, and it totally could have been prevented. And yeah, Zach just mentioned in the chat that there have been 22 deaths now at San Quentin in Ohlone territories. And yeah, I know that folks are working really hard there on that. And yeah, would also be interested in what other folks are working on with regards to COVID and abolition, if there's people besides us who are doing that, who have insights.
For sure, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Kai said that's genocide, and they're absolutely right. It is.
Yeah, like May said, we've all been working on this since March at least. I think one thing to point around COVID here in Oregon is that we're actually seeing, like, not just that the guards are the ones bringing it in to facilities by not wearing masks and not adhering to social distancing and claiming exemption from whatever policies they're instituting, but on an even more institutional level, we're also seeing here in Oregon that there are some prisons who are being tasked with doing the laundry from nearby hospitals, and specifically from hospitals with COVID wards. Those hospitals are then sending that laundry to be handled by prisoners with inadequate protections.
Oh my God.
That's awful.
I do want to flag that it is currently 12:20 Pacific time. We did start a little bit late, and I think, at least for myself, I'm down to hang out on the call for as much longer as folks want to. I think the other facilitators are in the same boat, but I do just kind of want to make sure that we have space for people who have questions, or for there to be a little bit more of an open conversation if that's something that people desire. I want to make sure that we have the opportunity for that.
Also, to end on a bit more of an up note real quick, like these intersections between environmental justice, radical environmentalism, climate justice, and abolition is the entire reason we started organizing, right? There is so much strength and vibrance within all of these organizing communities. We were like, let's just get together and just be way more badass collectively than we are separately, because there's just so much to learn from each other. And like, we've already been proving that when we do that, we win. And one of our sayings with FTP is we intend to win. We are going to fight until we bring this whole thing tumbling down, turn it into mulch, and grow the new out of the old, right? Because we got this. Akila asked, what's the best way to keep up with FTP's work? We really need to figure out our email list. But yeah, drop your email. You can follow Fight Toxic Prisons on Instagram, Fight X Prisons on Twitter, and Campaign to Fight Toxic Prisons on Facebook. And then our website is fight-toxic-prisons.org.
Post it in the chat.
Cool.
And then lastly, an email address to reach us as well, although, as Jordan just insinuated, we're maybe not the most cohesive in checking the email, but our email address is fighttoxicprisons@gmail.com.
But yeah, anybody have any thoughts, questions, burning commentary? Critiques? I love critiques.
Oh, also one thing that might have gotten missed, I'll repaste it in the chat, but when Richard mentioned the air conditioning work that's happening in Texas, I just wanted to name drop our friend, Comrade Malik, who really led that movement. And he's getting released in less than a month and really needs support for his reentry. So yeah, I just pasted his reentry fundraiser. I want everyone to know that we all pretty much organize full time and none of us are paid and none of us are getting paid for this workshop. So please just like throw money at Comrade Malik for us if you appreciated this work. And yeah, if y'all have any questions, we're happy to do our best to answer them, or like if there's any things that we didn't talk about that y'all want mentioned, this space is yours.
And if we didn't already say it, thank you to all of y'all for being here and sharing this space with us.
Good, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, if y'all want to stay in touch, just put your emails in here. That's something we absolutely need to do, make our like email serve and stuff like that. So we'll definitely, if we have some contact information for you, we can definitely get y'all up with information.
Yeah, Jules is wondering for contacts in so-called Pennsylvania. I believe we've got a number of them.
Jules, if you want to send me your email address, I can follow up with you. I used to live in Pennsylvania and have a lot of contacts there across the state, if you would like. And then Bowden is asking, have y'all moved mostly to online organizing since COVID started? Which I think, I mean, I can speak for myself as the FTP collective, being that we're very geographically distant from each other, a lot of our organizing, even before COVID, was through online communication or through conference calls. Since COVID, I think because of that, there was definitely a learning curve for us. We were already familiar with Zoom in a way that was really beneficial to us hitting the ground running with organizing around COVID in prisons. Speaking to my local organizing here in so-called Southern Oregon, we've definitely been doing a lot of online organizing. And as we've kind of settled into the reality of navigating COVID, we're starting to do a little bit more in-person organizing, but still emphasizing all of the necessary precautions around masking up and social distancing. But a lot of our communication is still done virtually. If anyone else has other thoughts on that.
The major thing that's changed about in-person organizing where I'm at is just the need to be outside and really accounting for weather and available spaces and the presence of cops. A lot of the organizing that's taking place here is around police accountability for violence and murders. So basically everything that we're working on is taking place in parks and courthouse lawns and spaces like that. And we've lost access to the indoor spaces and coffee shops and bookstores where we would be able to meet and be guaranteed, a surveillance-free location.
To answer Zach's question about if the Bayview fundraiser goes directly to Malik, the answer is yes. And the story on that is that the SF Bayview is a national Black newspaper that has been held down for decades by some elders who are like in their 80s and have cancer and have zero funding and are like fundraising month to month. and Malik has a job lined up with them and is going to be like their first employee in a really long time. And so they need funding in order to pay him so that he can have a job after reentry, which is like one of the conditions of his parole. So all of the money that's raised is going to pay him, and I can completely vouch because like I have worked directly with the Bayview and like consider them my elders. So yeah, that money is going directly to him.
Jessica asked about other fundraisers and support. We are doing, I don't know if anyone mentioned it earlier, but we're doing a monthly fundraiser for a Black, Indigenous, or POC organizer at this point. And I think we just finished up one right now, but probably within the next few weeks, we'll be posting for some other folks as well. And these are all folks that we know in person, and, you know, every cent of it's going to them.
Yeah, just keep an eye on our Instagram. We post fundraisers routinely.
Facts.
Also, somebody, I think Bowden asked for if there's folks in New Mexico, which ties in with things we need to be putting pressure on. Our comrade Celinda, who organizes with New Mexico IWalk.
Yeah, Millions for Prisoners too.
Yeah, Millions for Prisoners. Her partner, Clifton White, who is also an organizer and was organizing a lot of the Black Lives Matter demos in Albuquerque. He got targeted by the cops and arrested on a bullshit parole violation that they made up. And so he's back in prison now, and Celinda's been going through a ton of shit in regards to that. And so they've been working really hard to try and get him out. I think you can just type in support Clifton White or Millions for Prisoners New Mexico to find the information on that. And Agnes asks a good question.
So Agnes asked in the questions, I'm curious, for those of you deeply integrated in this work, what do you imagine for a world without prisons?
That's a great question.
Community care, harm reduction, basic income, free housing, free healthcare, no cops, no state, just people who care for each other and work out problems together. I really have nothing else to add to
that. Lil said that pretty well.
I want to live in Lil's world.
You already do.
Love it.
Yeah, for me, like trying to bridge the short term with the long term, like, you know, abolition is the horizon, the world in which, paraphrasing, I believe, Angela Davis or potentially Beth Ritchie, but abolition, you know, is the creation of a society in which we don't need to rely on prisons, right?
Facts.
Like, what would that society look like in which prisons are completely unnecessary and the police are completely unnecessary? And so for me, it looks in the short term, carving out what I like to call our own revolutionary infrastructure, our own spaces outside the state, outside of capital, in which we can begin to build the resources we need and our people need to survive, as well as the structures we need to be able to solve our own problems, right? And so, and that's why I've been really thinking about that accountability piece, because, you know, we've all seen accountability processes fail left and right. My question is why? And I believe that's because we don't have the infrastructure in place to really let them succeed and to be called into community. And I have a lot of critiques around whether community really exists in the way that we're using it in this era of late-stage neoliberal capitalism, right? In which the individual has been forced down our throats as the center of everything instead of the communal or the collective.
Facts.
So I think that's a big part of it is reframing the communal in our work instead of the individual.
Facts. Yeah. Jordan, I love that. I would also speak to just like the process of getting to that point. We talked a little bit about it when we were talking about abolition and when we were talking about climate justice. For me, it's two parts to it. It's doing everything that we can do to start delimiting or to start limiting our reliance on the state for our well-being. And at the same time, as we start working on all those processes to limit the role the state has on our well-being, we also need to start building our own communal infrastructures within our local communities, our state communities, and all those different things, so that like, because once we have a world without prisons, we need something left. So we need to start building two ways from that. So that would be like building our own mutual aid groups, like, and just like my own kind of like side thought about what COVID has done for like organizers. Like George posted a lot of really great memes about this, like when COVID was first happening, just about like a lot of people are really confused and not knowing what to do and things like that. But for organizers, like, it's the stuff that we've been struggling for and the stuff we've been fighting for a long time. And like the whole idea of mutual aid, like it's obviously nothing new to us, but other folks are starting to see the logic in the thing. Even stuff like defunding the police. I just gave a talk about that a couple of nights ago. Like, obviously my ultimate goal is abolition. I don't want to defund the police. Obviously I want to completely abolish all those things, but we have to start gradual processes, and sometimes, like, depending on where you are, those processes look differently, but everywhere we do need to start gradual processes to bring people into these conversations and into creating the world that we want to have, because ultimately, like, the world that we're building isn't just going to be for us, it's for everybody. So we got to build those communities together, and that comes from a lot of different things.
I think, sorry, are you done, Richard?
Ducky, you were go, Ducky, go ham.
I think to add on to what Richard and Jordan are saying, I think there's the practical and tangible things that we can do to move towards a world without police and prisons. And I think that looks like the reactionary and reactive stuff of tearing down the structures that are oppressing people and hindering our path to liberation as they stand now. I think there's also developing structures that will help us move forward. And that includes what Richard and Jordan are talking about in regards to building mutual aid networks, in regards to having community-centered transformative justice and restorative justice models for addressing accountability within our own communities. But I think another part of it that's really hard to kind of put into tangible steps or to apply in a non-theoretical level is that there needs to be a cultural shift away from disposability politics.
Facts,
and there
facts.
needs to
Ducky.
be cultural recognition that people do have the ability to rehabilitate, to change, and to engage in society to the best of their means, best of their abilities in ways that, I think that's what I would say, is just that, like, at the core of abolition work is the recognition that people have the ability and the power to always become a better person than they are in the moment right now. And that needs to be centered in abolition work if we're going to be working for a world where we're not relying on outside structures in order to maintain our safety. That means that our safety and our well-being needs to be grounded in communal trust, and that trust has to come from a recognition of our innate ability to grow and be better people.
Preach, Ducky. Say it again.
I can't even remember what I just said.
To add to what Ducky's saying, I think we have to get rid of the instinct to punish, even within ourselves, not just from the state. But we're taught that punishment is a consequence that is normal and that's natural, along those environmental lines, that punishment is what should happen. And the fact is that if punishment worked, we wouldn't have any harm or crime or whatever anymore, because, well, especially in the US, because we use punishment more than any other tool at our disposal, but we still have more people locked up than anywhere else in the world. And we still have so many people suffering so many injustices. So we have to just remind ourselves, even if that's our instinct, and even if we are angry and hurt and want some sort of resolution to a problem, that punishment is not going to bring that resolution. And
Correct.
on a hopeful note, you know, I think that I agree with what Ducky's saying. I think people always have the potential to grow, but sorry, my brain's kind of wandering. I think I lost what I was going to say. I have too many thoughts. Too pumped about abolition.
Robin, you always have great thoughts. Feel free to share whatever those are.
Thank you. There's also 3 cats climbing on me, and that distracts me.
I agree with everything that's been said, but I also do want to add that I think that consequences for harm are really important. And I think that when we get into conversations about abolition and rehabilitation and trying to move away from logics of punishment, a lot of times people just get hella soft and are just like, oh, let's just take care of this person who caused harm. But really, like, there do need to be consequences in order for healing to happen and for rehabilitation and growth to happen. And so I don't want us to get confused and be like, oh, abolitionists just let people do whatever they want. Like,
facts, yeah.
Each other by like holding each other to be better, and that sometimes requires like social consequences, and I don't think we have the ability to get all deep into that, or that's like our area of specialty as FTP. But yeah, just want to flag that we are not softies.
Meg, that's an important part, because oftentimes the question people ask is like, okay, what do you do with serial killers and things like that, or whatever? It's a response to policing. It's a response to any forms of violence, because the conversation is just framed in terms of harm. The answer I always think about is, or just the way I conceive of it, is that we do need better and intentional practice to reduce harm and to also address the harm. But what we can say for sure is that prisons and policings are not the way to do that. But it doesn't mean that we don't come up with ways to address the harm that's committed to people. Because accountability is really tough. Like, holding people accountable is not an easy thing to do. But it's not just about saying, hey, you did this, or hey, this is your punishment for doing that.
And yeah, this sort of goes back, Richard, to what I was trying to say a bit earlier in regards to the comment around all of us seeing left and right accountability processes failing. For me, the Abolitionist Project is one of creation, right? And I want to like reflect sort of Adrienne Marie Brown's thoughts around the part reflecting the whole, right? And essentially what she's saying with that is, how could we possibly expect to create a world that is healing, that is just, that is meeting of all of our needs, socially, physically, etc., if we're not even doing that within the organizations we're working in that is trying to bring about that world, right?
Yep.
And so if we're really taking that as the challenge that it is for us to begin figuring out, how do we create organizations in which our needs are being met physically, emotionally, socially, etc. How do we extend that beyond just the organizations, right? How do we extend that into the community at large? And this is my critiques around community doesn't actually exist. We need to fundamentally sit down and reimagine from a person-to-person level, how are we actively implementing this type of care in our everyday lives with the people that we're working with, right? And that also then extends into these more deeper thoughts around what is accountability itself, because it's very hard to hold someone accountable if you're not in community with them, or if you're with them, right? If you're not in a state of mutual care, etc., how are you going to possibly then hold that person accountable if they can just get up and move to a different social circle, or there is no consequences in regards to their actions? And so that's why I think beginning to really put accountability into each step of our work and each step we take as a framework in which we're accountable, like Kai said, to the land, to our ancestors, to each other, to the movement more broadly. That's what's going to take for us to actually get to the broader cultural shift in which accountability is, we're able to actually call each other in and hold each other accountable when we make mistakes. And I also think it's important to, within that process, view critique as a necessary component and a gift, right? If we're being critiqued, it's because the people critiquing us, if we're in the community with them, care, right? It's because they want us to be our best selves and vice versa. And that's not, that doesn't vibe with this like ingrained individualism that is so central to our culture, right? So yeah, I'm working on trying to like turn all this into its own workshop.
Yeah, we have been working on something like that. We'll get it done eventually, Jordy.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I would add also, and this is something that we've been talking about internally as a collective, when it comes to accountability, like it needs to be trauma informed. Like we need, if we're trying to be accountable to like our ancestors, to the land, to people on the front lines, to each other, like all of those relationships involve like deep, sometimes intergenerational trauma, and that makes us like we don't understand or like can't account for. And so like when we're holding each other to do better, we also need to like understand that the ways that we're acting are not rational because of this thing called trauma, and like how do we get to the root of what that is and heal that as part of the process.
May, I appreciate you've been going hard taking notes. That's dope. Like,
yeah, thank you.
They're really messy, but I will take pictures of them and post them onto our Instagram.
All right.
I think they look perfect.
They look great from here.
Me and Jordy had planned on like setting up a whiteboard to do something similar, but you definitely got us. We very much appreciate that.
Yeah, and if folks want to drop their personal Instas, I'm gonna go ahead and drop mine if y'all want to continue conversations and stuff more.
Yeah, for sure. If you follow us on Insta, you'll definitely hear some pretty rad reflections from me and Jordan at like 2 and 3 in the morning.
Facts. And I also want to flag that it's about 15 minutes till the next panel, and it looks particularly badass. So I don't want to take.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to the next panel. I don't know where y'all are going, but I'm definitely heading to the next panel.
Well, thank you everyone for taking the time, participating.
Thank you all so much for joining. I'm so sorry that there were some Zoom link issues. I'm gonna go ahead and check the links for all the other activities, so we should do it in the future. But yes, thank you all so much. It's so great to see so many folks engaged in this conversation, and thanks to all the Fight Toxic Prisons crew. I was all texting Ella earlier. I was like, oh, I want to be like them. So yeah, y'all are such an inspiration for us here in the Southwest. So thank you.
Toxic Prison is like just so dreamy. Y'all are just goals. Y'all are just #goals.
Dang.
Also, I don't know who's all behind these masks. So if any people who were behind these masks happen to know me very well and happen to be people I love, hey.
Hi, Mariela. We love you too.